Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. My name is FPL Phillips or Eddie, and today I'm going to be taking you through the Game Week 2 episode of Eddie versus the Algorithm. And if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe, where this is the series that we take the computer-generated team that the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm has predicted to score the highest amount of points for each game week of the FPL season. We see what that team's like, and then I put together my own free hit-esque draft for each game week of the season, and over the course of the 38 game weeks of that calendar year, we can then have a look and see who is better, man or machine at FPL. We managed to draw last year, so there's all the more on the line at this campaign. And so far in Game Week 1, we need to have a look at how that team did before we can move on to having a look at maybe what you're here for, which is the computer-generated team for Game Week 2. So yeah, before we get into that, let's have a quick recap of the algorithm side in Game Week 1. And this is how it got on: 77 points. We'll see in just a moment if I managed to outscore that. But when you consider that Ruben Diaz didn't feature in that first game, Visser's points unfortunately glued to the bench as well, 77 is a pretty respectable score. I'd have to say the Gabriel debacle as well. Of course, the algorithm doesn't get the early team news like 5 minutes before the deadline, like some of us human managers were of course able to capitalize on. And when you consider all those factors, I'd say it was a pretty respectable return. Bruno Fernandes and Rashford, the only real disappointments and letdowns in the side, you'd have to say. Some nice returns from Onana in goal, Estupinian, Akanji, a few assists across the midfield as well, and of course Bukayo Saka and Haaland, who are very highly owned. So 77 points was not too bad at all. Really unfortunate to have Visser's returns and Ferguson's goal also glued down there on the bench. And Baldock was actually the one who came in for Ruben Diaz to contribute to that 77-point total. But let's have a look at my team now, and did I in fact manage to beat the algorithm in Game Week 1? I in fact did. I scored 78 points, so I won by a margin of 1 point in Game Week 1. And it was thanks to a few individuals who can go named Edison in goal, Estupinian, Shaw. Ben White was a bit of a disappointment, but kind of the same, ended up scoring the same as Gabriel in the end, with Arsenal's clean sheet getting wiped out. And of course, Saliba being the main one who actually scored any sort of points from the Arsenal backline with that assist that he managed to grab for Saka's goal. In midfield, it was a pretty similar looking midfield. In fact, it was the exact same midfield, but I had João Pedro up front, who scored that penalty, also grabbed some bonus for a nice 7-point total that did in fact make the difference. If he hadn't got those bonus, then I could have lost to the algorithm in Game Week 1. But those are those kind of fine margins. You can see the scoreboard at the bottom of your screen where it now says Eddie 1, algorithm 11-0. So I'll take that victory, I'll take it as small as it is, and move into Game Week 2, hoping that I can achieve the same result, maybe with a little bit more of a convincing victory over the computer this week. But let's get into maybe what you're here for, and that is the computer-generated team ahead of Game Week 2. And what I find really interesting straight off the bat is that this is a formation that I'm not really seeing anyone use in FPL at the moment, especially experienced managers. There's just so many stacked midfield options at the moment that you're very rarely seeing a 3 midfield formation and a 4-3-3. So surprising to see that the algorithm's gone with that. Maybe in Game Week 2 specifically, that might be a little bit different, and maybe there aren't as many midfield options. We shall see which ones the algorithm has decided to go for. So we'll see Leno in goal as the first pick. Brentford at home, to be honest, doesn't seem the easiest fixture, and Fulham didn't look like they were the best defence in Game Week 1. In truth, I thought Leno was quite lucky to come away with the clean sheet, and that was more thanks to his own ability rather than his defence doing a lot of the work for him. Whether he can repeat the heroics of Game Week 1, I think is relatively unlikely, but 4.6 predicted points for him at home to Brentford. There isn't a massive bulk of keepers who look good for this week, so I guess you could take a gamble on Leno managing to pull off another few save points, bonus points, and grabbing himself a double-digit haul. If Fulham can keep a clean sheet, then I'm sure he'll certainly call again in terms of FPL. But I just personally don't think there's a clean sheet in this one for Fulham in Game Week 2. But I've been proven wrong by the computer numerous times last season, so maybe that will happen again. You guys can tell me your thoughts on everything, as usual, down below in the comments. But what I really want you to tell me is, are you Team Eddie or Team Algo for this week? When we get to the end of both teams, let me know which team you think is going to score more points. You might start actually keeping track of who does the best in terms of predicting it. Anyway, let's move into the back four then, where we obviously have a defensive line featuring one Liverpool asset, but I was expecting it to be a different one, to be honest. We've got Andy Robertson in here. alongside Aston Villa's Konsa and Cash for their home fixture against Everton, as well as Estupinian, who's probably the only real non-surprising one of the back line. Robertson against Bournemouth. I'm guessing Trent does actually have a slightly higher predicted points total, but maybe isn't able to get in here because of budget. In fact, if you want to see the top 10 predicted points total from yesterday, you can make sure to check out my team reveal video that was also on the channel. If you want to see the live, most newly updated ones, then you can, of course, follow the links via the ones down below in the description over to Fantasy Football Fix, where you're able to find all the predicted points tools and use them to look up all the players in your team and search via that way. We've got Concert and Cash for the Aston Villa game, home to Everton, who I thought looked pretty good in Game Week 1 Everton. I thought they were unlucky not to put one past Fulham, to be honest, as we kind of alluded to with Leno and him being lucky to get a clean sheet in that game week. So I could definitely see Everton scoring a goal. The second game on the bounce for them not to score would be a little bit unlucky. But they are away from home, of course, in that one to Aston Villa, who were a very formidable side last season, and I won't be overreacting at all to the Newcastle victory over them, which was, of course, rather dominant. But I back Emery to get them back on track, and what way to do that it would be in Game Week 2 at home to Everton. So yeah, maybe a clean sheet in there. If it does, then I think the algorithm's definitely going to have I'm going to have some big work to do to try and catch up the algorithm, because that will be some serious points. So overall, a bit of a mixed bag with the defence. I think there are some better options out there right now in terms of the defensive picks, even for next game week in isolation, which we'll get onto when we look at my team. But an interesting defence to definitely talk about and discuss. In midfield, we are, of course, seeing those captained armband, which means we're going to see Mo Salah in this side, alongside Phil Foden, who has just played quite a lot of minutes in the Super Cup in midweek for Man City, and then Heung-min Son, who is probably one that I back the least out of the Spurs midfield options, if you include Maddison and Richarlison alongside Son in terms of general FPL consideration at the moment. But surprising to see Spurs midfielder in there at all, to be honest, with a home fixture against Manchester United, who did manage to keep a clean sheet in Game Week 1 amongst all the controversy surrounding the penalty in the last minute, where, to be honest, let's be truthful, they probably shouldn't have kept a clean sheet, and that should have been a penalty, as I think the refereeing body has even come out and said now. So anyways, Manchester United's defence, it looks decent, but personally, I don't see clean sheets in for either team. That would lend itself to maybe even being a high-scoring game, and so Son could probably do quite well. Personally, won't be using up a decent chunk of my budget on going for him, and I do prefer Maddison or even Richarlison if you're going to go for a Spurs mid in general. And then finally, up front, we're going to see a front line of course, Erling Haaland, who's going to make it in the team probably every week until he's injured or out. But he did, of course, play 90 minutes as well. As I'm recording this, Pep's come in with a few quotes talking about how, his team's got too many games, etc. I think they're playing on Saturday, and he's rather angry about that. I don't know whether we can read into that and think maybe as a result there might be a slim chance of some weird Man City rotation on the Saturday. Maybe Pep's going to do that as a bit of an I told you so, or to try and back up his point about Manchester City's fixtures being too congested. But you would hope that Haaland and probably Foden's minutes are going to be relatively safe. Cole Palmer did play really well and was actually subbed off in that game too. He grabbed the goal for City in that match. So maybe he's going to offer a little bit of a threat to one of those kind of frontline positions where it was looking more likely that Foden and Alvarez would get minutes due to De Bruyne's injury. So in general, Phil Foden's probably not a pick I like that much at the moment, and I won't be choosing to go with him, especially with a home fixture against Newcastle, because I think they're one of the teams who are looking the best in the league from what we've seen in Game Week 1 anyway. But I do like the rest of the front line. I really like Ollie Watkins, and I really like the Awenai shouts. He's probably my favourite differential pick of this game week for sure. Sheffield United look pretty poor, as most people expected with the start of the season. And yeah, he'll definitely be in my team too, which we're going to see in just a second. On the bench then, in case they are needed, Baldock is stuck there at first sub again, but he probably won't be blocking too many points this week because Arta and Chukwuemeka are the other men down there on the bench. Not to say anything against those two. I think Carney of Chelsea will actually do quite well at points this season, and of course is now starting with Nkunku's injury. Turner's down there on the bench as well, 3.6 predicted points for anyone wondering that, because I think a lot of managers are choosing to start him over the likes of Pickford, Johnston, or even Onana in their teams this week. And speaking of teams, this is my side and my picks to go up against the algorithm 11. I've gone with Martinez in goal, so I have got some Villa defensive cover, but then across the back line, I think James and Chilwell just need to come in right now. They've only got 3.3 predicted points apiece. Away at West Ham is not the easiest fixture, but their attacking threat, if Chelsea continue to kind of play this back five system, which I'm hoping they do, but either way, I think they look fantastic. Chilwell, especially going forward, is almost playing as a forward himself, so has to be in this side for me and is currently in my own personal team. Hopefully James can stay fit, and that way he'll provide a nice long-term option as well, but happy to go with him on this free hit team too. Less worried about the clean sheets and more just targeting the most attacking of defenders. In midfield, I've gone for a very different looking midfield. I've still got Mo Salah, who's taken the captain's armband, but Luis Diaz is also coming in for me for Liverpool's nice fixture at home to Bournemouth. Would have liked to squeeze Trent in, but didn't quite have the budget for it, to be honest. I wanted some of the other players you can see in this team and wasn't quite able to reshuffle things to maybe go with a 4 at the back and squeeze in Trent, who did do very well in the fixture against Bournemouth last year, I seem to recall. But in that midfield, I've instead gone for Saka, I've gone for Mbomo, and I've gone for Gibbs-White to partner him up with Awoniyi, who, as I mentioned, will be in my side for a double up on the Nottingham Forest attack up against Sheffield United. On the bench, I've gone with Henry, Matty Cash, who was in the Algorithm 11, and Osula, who just seems to be the starting 4.5 million forward of choice, with Turner on my bench as the backup keeper as well. So it's 57 predicted points for me, which of course falls short of the Algorithm's total, which would be, if it comes true, a much lower average than we saw kind of in Game Week 1 amongst some of the best teams you can find out there in terms of the experienced FPL managers. But yeah, let me know what you think, guys, down below in the comments. It's that time in the video. Team Eddie or Team Algorithm, what is your prediction for who to come out on top this week in terms of points? Thank you very much for tuning in, and I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 2, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Goodbye.